welcome to the niche part of the internet where I talk about whatever's on my mind. And today, as you see from the title, I'm talking about the origin of cinema. And I really, when I was thinking of what I'm going to call this, I was like, is this the origin of cinema? And if I'm being honest, it quite frankly is. I may have been 7 when the first film came out, but I was lucky enough where when the last ones were coming out, I was what, like 12, 13 or something? Perfect age because I was hooked. I had nothing else to do with my time except worry about if Bella is going to choose Edward or Jacob. I remember my cousin had a team Jacob jumper and I was like, girl, I'm gonna fucking fight you, get rid of that. I was team Edward to the day I die, and now I understand that that is the correct choice. If you are team Jacob, you are wrong. He is weird and he annoys me. Edward also annoys me, but in a different level. It's not as irritating. He's not an animal. He may be dead, but he's not an animal. And if we are discussing Twilight 2008, we must begin with, quite frankly, the most important part about it, which was that fuck-ass blue filter. When I talk about how Twilight was the origin of cinema, I'm really talking about how how the film would merely not exist without this fuck-ass blue filter. An intern who listened to way too much Bring Me the Horizon walked into the producer's studio and said, I have an idea. And they made history. They walked into them Disney studios and they said they're going to make history, and that's exactly what they did. A fuck-ass blue filter walked so that VSCO could run. It was the origin of editing and the Instagram feed as we know it today. You thought Tumblr was it? No. Actually, I was joking, but if I'm being honest, Twilight Tumblr was very prominent. It was like that Draco Malfoy Tumblr. Like, you just had to be there. This is what I mean. Twilight was indeed the origin of cinema and pop culture as we know it today, and let's not lie about it, please. Thank you. Thank you. I have the microphone and I'm speaking facts. Have you seen those edits of what the movie would look like without that fuck-ass blue filter? It is truly terrifying. There's just that je ne sais quoi, if you so will, about that fuck-ass blue filter. It just, everything comes back to this blue filter. It just creates that moodiness. You just know. And this is why, still to this day, as soon as the leaves start turning brown, that is being watched. All, like, what, 6 films, isn't it? They get watched start to finish. As soon as it gets a little bit chilly in the air, that is what has to be done. It's a canon effect. All the girls that gotta get it. Secondly, we need to discuss quite possibly the most complex scene of that whole film, which is the scene where Bella sees Edward for the first time. I must discuss how culty the Cullen clan, you say that 10 times fast, is in that scene. The way they're all like wearing white with their dark hair, and then Rosalie's got that fuck-ass wig that looks so fake. The budget was not there. That shaky camera, oh my god. The cinematography. The girls are gotta get it. And I got it. Even at the ripe age of 7, I got it. An insane amount of shit happens in that first scene when it's like, what, like 2 minutes long, and it's arguably one of the most important scenes in the whole like film franchise. And they did what had to be done. They made it memorable, but not in a good way. Not in a good way. They just made it very weird, if I'm being completely honest. And we need to discuss, what's his name? Emmett. Emmett's bag of hard-boiled eggs. I swore whenever I was watching that films that he was carrying his bag of hard-boiled eggs in one of those like net bags that like oranges come in. Now I know it's in a sandwich bag, but I just remember it being in like a white farmer's market net bag. He's a sustainable queen. And I just love the story behind it, where obviously the actor had to get absolutely massive for the role. So he was eating hard-boiled eggs and all that kind of stuff for all the protein. And the director saw him walk onto set with a bag of hard-boiled eggs and was like, not a single human on the planet would do that. We need to write that into the script. Because he's not human, he's a vampire. And it makes sense, but it's so unserious the way that they never talked about it after. It was just like an Easter egg for anyone who cared enough to look at it. Like, that's not in the books. It's just them hard-boiled eggs are just so unserious. And speaking of unserious, I only saw a TikTok recently. Bear in mind, like, I've been a twihard, if you so will, since I was 7 years old. And I only just saw a TikTok maybe, what, like 3 months ago? That someone noticed that as soon as Edward sits down, he does this. And then he sits down. This is how he balances his weight to sit down. This. Make it make sense. I tell you, Robert Pattinson just had an idea and he went with it with this set. He was like, I'm going to do something. Will it make sense? I'm not quite sure, but it's going to be done, and it was done. Speaking of Robert Pattinson doing whatever the hell he wants to do, I love the fact that he was nearly fired because he just didn't care. He was just putting absolutely no effort in, because that's what he thought Edward Cullen was. He thought Edward Cullen was Mr. Cool Guy, Mr. Mysterious, who doesn't really need to put any effort in. So that's what he did. Robert Pattinson was just fucking around on set, dicking around, doing whatever he wanted to do. Just were like, girl, you gotta put more effort in, look like you're at least trying, otherwise we're gonna recast you and you're gonna get fired. And then that was the origin of arguably one of the best scenes in the whole franchise, which was when Edward was dropping Bella to school and they like walk in together and he's wearing the sunglasses and everyone's staring at them. And he was like, oh, and Bella's like, oh, everyone's staring at us. And he's like, no, they're staring at you. I can just imagine Robert Pattinson having too much fun on that set, being like, you want me to try harder? Get the props team, where's the sunglasses? I am going to serve. He's actually so funny. Like, there was no better person could have played Edward Cullen. You needed a little weirdo. Him and Barry Keoghan are the weirdos of the 21st century, and they do their job very well. There's very few people who can meet that standard that Robert Pattinson has set. Edward Cullen probably being one of them. The research for this, I decided to brave the depths of Reddit, which is, it's a scary place. And I looked at like niche Twilight facts, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I could very well be wrong, because I have not rewatched the movies before I decided to sit here with a microphone. But apparently in one of the final scenes of the first Twilight film, when Bella is in the hospital after that whole like ballet studio thing, apparently while she's lying in bed, the TV on the wall in the hospital is actually playing the ballet studio scene where she like nearly dies and Edward like has to save her and all that kind of stuff. Twilightception, if you so will. And if Twilightception is real, you heard it here first. This is where Christopher Nolan got his inspiration for Interstellar and all that. When I say it's the origin of film, I am not lying. Yet again, more proof that Twilight 2008 was the origin of modern cinema. I've decided while I'm here, I must discuss the other films. Specifically the baby. That baby. That fuck-ass mutant baby. The thing about the baby is, though, in the actual movies, they finished the CGI, so she looks a lot better. But in that photo of the baby, she's truly terrifying. She is very much giving, you nicknamed my daughter after the Loch Ness Monster! Like, you cannot tell me that that baby does not give Nessie, the Loch Ness Monster. Mutant. Truly terrifying. This is the future of AI. It's just so funny that, like, in the actual films, the baby is creepy, but not terrifying. But that half CGI generated version is truly something from nightmares. I've actually decided to circle back to the Twilight fever thing. I understand it's one of those things that a lot of people did not experience. And I truly can't explain how, like, crazy it was. Like, every single shop was selling Team Edward or Team Jacob stuff. It was like, the only thing somewhat comparable to it was when Marvel's Civil War came out and everyone was, are you Team, was it Team Stark or Team Captain? I was Team Cap. And that is the right choice. Let's be honest, they should not have signed that treaty. It's also really important to note that Twilight and Harry Potter films were coming out around the same time. So the cinema was the place to be. You can just imagine, one year you're getting like Deathly Hallows Part 1, the next year you're getting Breaking Dawn Part 1, the next year you're getting Deathly Hallows Part 2, and then Breaking Dawn Part 2. It was crazy. It was a time to be alive when these two franchises were finishing together. That was like the peak of cinema. Everyone was talking about it. We need to bring back vampires because cinema and TV shows are dying. Like, even in the Vampire Diaries, they joke about Twilight. Like, it's just such a cultural phenomenon. Fun story time, whenever Breaking Dawn Part 2 was coming out, I saw it the day it released. It was crazy. Like, I remember the queues all the way out the door to the cinema. It was mad that we got tickets. Anyway, I had to go to the bathroom. So I go to the bathroom halfway through the film, and then I come back out and I walk into the wrong cinema screen. So as soon as I open that door, all I see is, what's his name from the Volturi, holding up Carlisle's head. I was like, no. I was not at that point in the film. I just had to like back out of the cinema, pretend I didn't see it, go back into the cinema I was meant to, where I was only meant to be halfway through the film, not nearly finished it. And then I just had to sit there in silence being like, is Carlisle dead or not? And then when the scene actually came around that I was meant to see, oh my god. My friend I was with literally fell out of her seat crying. So then when I eventually saw the scene with Carlisle's head being held up, I was like, okay, this is real, this is very much happening. Only for it then to all be fake. Only for it then to all be a dream. Back to Christopher Nolan, I'm telling you, Twilight is the origin of every Christopher Nolan film. What a time. I'm feeling very nostalgic. And all I'm going to say is you had to be there, and I'm sorry that you couldn't be there. Speaking of Carlisle though, we must discuss some Carlisle lore, because there is some extensive lore, which I have explored in depth on Reddit, which is, again, a truly terrifying place. But turns out, actually, take a guess. How old do you think Esme and Carlisle are meant to be in the films? Like, how old do you think they are whenever they get turned into a vampire? I know they're like 200 now. Take a guess. 23 and 26. 23 and 26. Esme is 23 and Carlisle is meant to be 26. I myself am currently the ripe age of 23, and let me tell you one thing. I really hope I don't look like that actress, because why were they getting a 45-year-old actress? Why were they getting a full-on middle-aged woman to play a supposedly 23-year-old? I understand it's to make it like more believable or something. But if that's the case and that's what was actually in the books, that is wild. That would also be crazy considering how that meant that Carlisle would have gone through all of school, gone to med school, been certified, and made a name for himself as a doctor by the time he turned 26. I tell you, the lore for this franchise is batshit crazy. What's also batshit crazy is the sexual chemistry between Carlisle and Bella. That one scene where she like got at the cut in New Moon or something, isn't it? And he's fixing up her cut. That is insane. All the girls were shipping Carlisle and Bella. Like, why were they being so flirty? What was the reason?
What was the reason? What was the reason? I just explained.
I'm here for it though. I'm a Carlisle girl. I think he's one of the best characters in the whole show. He's just, there's a little something, he's kind of a little bit fruity, I think, as well. Me and Carlisle, I think, would be besties. And no, I think he will get fed up with me pretty quickly. I just love Carlisle. Justice for Carlisle. Thankfully, he never actually died whenever they held up his head like that. Thankfully. Love you, Carlisle. Also, I have family in Washington State in America, and I visited them a few years back. And whenever I was over there, I was like, oh, I might go and see like their filming locations for Twilight. They're all real places. Like, Forks is a real town in Washington State, just like a little bit away from Seattle. That beach, what's the name of that beach? Anyway, they're all real places. Every single thing that's mentioned is a real place that you can go and visit. It's not a set. Like, Forks exists. The fact that Forks exists and is like a fully functioning town just does not sit right in my brain. I feel like it should be like that one town that's reused all the time in those ABC shows. Like, the same town is used in Pretty Little Liars, Vampire Diaries. What's the other show? And like, they use all the same houses and all that kind of stuff. No, not for Twilight. Except, isn't it the Cullen house in like a different state or something in the middle of nowhere? Oh yeah, the Cullen house is an actual house that they used, okay? The Cullen house was a real house that they used for the first films, but then they couldn't get the rights to filming it for the rest, or it was too complicated or something, so they had to recreate the Cullen house, like, brick by brick, artificially, to make it look exactly the same as a genuine house. So although technically it's a set, it is based entirely off a real house. Crazy. Imagine living in that house. Imagine your family home being the Cullen house. Another Twilight lore that I only found out shockingly recently, but it makes complete sense, and I'm amazed that I missed it and so many other people missed it. Stephenie Meyers, the author of the Twilight franchise, is Mormon. And there's one thing about Mormons is they're going to spread the word. They're going to do their little missionary thing. But like, when you think about it, there is an insane amount of Mormon propaganda hidden within the films. Like the fact that Edward wouldn't do anything until they were married. The fact that, what's his name, Jasper was a Confederate soldier. Like, there are so many signs that show Mormon propaganda that people just didn't realise until recently. And once you know that though, you actually just can't go back and watch them films. I've gone back and watched them, what, like once or twice since I found that out. And it's just, like, it just doesn't sit right. You know, whatever I'm not judging Mormons. If you're Mormon, slay, go for you. I just don't want Mormon propaganda in my little romance, my little vampire romance. And that's exactly what it was given to me, without my consent. The Confederate soldiers and the no sex until marriage and all. And everyone just brushed over that. No one thought about it. The signs were there. Joshua! Another thing I discovered in my Reddit lore deep dive is that every single song written for the soundtrack is an original song. So Christina Perri's 1,000 Years and Sleeping at Last, Turning Page are arguably the biggest songs from the franchise. And that Robert Pattinson song, you know, when he just makes sounds and doesn't actually sing and no one knows the words to that song. If you do, I don't want to know them, I just mumble along. They are all original songs written specifically for the film. And these are huge songs that went on to be massive hits, and I'm sure are so many people's first dance songs. But they were written specifically for the film. It's giving Lana Del Rey's Young and Beautiful, that was written exclusively for the Great Gatsby film. And that's what, one of the best Lana songs? Argue with the Wall. I wouldn't call myself a Lana stan, but there's no lying that that song is incredible. If you've been to a wedding since 2012-ish, I guarantee you Turning Page by Sleeping at Last or 1,000 Years by Christina Perri is played at that wedding at some point. That being said, the Twilight franchise is currently being reprinted on vinyl, and I feel like I need to grab New Moon because that soundtrack is just so cozy. The same with that blue filter. Once it gets a little bit dark in the evenings, that's exactly what needs to be played. Another Twilight lore, which I think everyone knows at this point, the connection between Gerard Way, the lead singer of My Chemical Romance, who wrote the song The Black Parade, when I was a young boy my father took me into the city to see a marching band, and how that was inspired by 9/11, and how that then inspired the 50 Shades franchise. The connection between Gerard Way, 9/11 and 50 Shades of Grey, having Twilight right there in the middle just makes perfect sense. Fly effect theory, and then there's this, which just proves it entirely. I'm telling you, the early 2000s were a batshit crazy time. Me being a toddler, I can tell you all about it. I have no memory. I was playing with my Bratz dolls, because one thing about me, I was a Bratz doll. I'm not a Barbie girl. Barbie film, amazing, but I was a Bratz girl. And I think I will leave it at that. I think I've discussed the origin of cinema enough. I do understand that there are some more critically acclaimed films. I swear the Twilight franchise, specifically Twilight 2008, the first film, is aging like a fine alcohol, not quite fine wine, because it is getting better and better, but it just gets funnier and it gets more unserious. Not quite fine wine territory, but definitely fine alcohol. Because I swear up until maybe 2 years ago, I did rewatch them religiously as like romance films. But now they're just funny. And I'm sure I'll go back to watching them as romance films and then they'll go back to being funny. They are truly timeless, if I'm being honest. And it all comes down to that fuck ass blue filter. I'm telling you, that was the origin. That was the success story of the Twilight franchise, was that fuck ass blue filter. Without that, I don't think any of the rest of the films would have been picked up. Thank you for listening to my TED Talk. Goodbye, have a nice day.